Welcome to Lizzie's Bedtime Stories Pride Special. I have a returning guest, Mary Vermillion, and her husband, Ben Thiel. They're writing a memoir together, and they'll tell you a little bit more about it, and they're going to read their individual prologues, and after that we'll chat. So welcome, Mary and Ben.
Thank you.
Hey, Liz.
So can you talk a little bit about the project, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. As you just said, of course, this is a joint memoir, and we probably started writing this together maybe 4 years ago. We've been together as of this summer 21 years, and about halfway in, so about 10 years ago, I started to come out as transgender. Mm-hmm. And I had done some writing on my own about that, and then Mary had done some writing on her own. And then a few years ago, we just decided this would be so much more powerful if we put our own perceptions into one book, so mm-hmm. that the readers could not only see our own individual stories and our story as a couple, but I think that it also, putting them together, we sort of speak to each other from chapter to chapter because we go back and forth. One will write a chapter and the next will write another chapter, and we don't respond to each other directly, but at the same time, the reader can really be in a particular time period with us, a particular aspect of our transition as a couple, and see my perspective and see Mary's perspective, and I think really get a much deeper, more organic sense mm-hmm. of what it means to transition, partially because nobody transitions in a vacuum. It's all about relationships with other people. And so this is just a way to really spotlight exactly what that means.
I think it's important on a lot of different levels. I just moved down to the Jersey Shore, and occasionally I've attended PFLAG meetings because they have support groups, LGBT support groups that have adults in them as well as younger folks. Uh-huh. And one of the things that Abby, who is in charge of it, wanted to do was have my partner and I go to the transgender meeting, which is the only transgender PFLAG meeting in New Jersey. And basically they wanted to see that it's possible not only to find a partner who will accept you and love you, but that you can have a long-term relationship. My partner and I are together 9 years and 4 years married in October. And so I think your story, your joint story, will give hope, considering that you've been together for over 2 decades. It'll save lives.
Oh, wow. That's so great to hear. And I know that when Ben was first coming out, I was dying for a book where I could read about a couple like us having a happy ending. Mm-hmm. So that's lovely to hear, and I hope we can do that.
I really think that's what you're doing, and what's helpful is by creating an organic, like you said, holistic view on your experience throughout your relationship and especially after transitioning. One of the things that's a little sad in the documentaries that I've watched on television is that the majority of couples, if they start out as a lesbian couple and then the butch partner, comes out to themselves as transgender and wants to transition, a lot of times those relationships fall apart.
Yeah.
And it's really heartbreaking, and I've seen documentaries where, and when the documentary was being filmed, they were still making things work out, and then you find out, like, when they do follow-ups, that they're broken up. So it's important to show these long-term, happy, healthy relationships, and everybody has their own challenges when in long-term relationships, but you guys are doing a very valuable thing, and I hope you guys go on education circuits to share your book once it's out.
Oh, wow, that's great. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, like go to PFLAG meetings, go to colleges, high schools, elementary schools, because, it's a tool and it's an important thing, and there's going to be somebody in that audience that their life will be saved. And it's sad, but there are a lot of transgender folks. Their likelihood of attempting or feeling like they needed to end their life is bigger because they can't find acceptance in a community. So this is really exciting and important book, and I'll stop babbling and let you talk. Mary, you're going to do your prologue first, correct?
Indeed. And so far, our book has the clever name Untitled.
I love it.
So here we go.
Even your book has no labels.
That's
yeah,
right. That's
yeah,
awesome.
That's how we meant it. Okay. The first time Beth came out to me as transgender, we were lying in bed, our fingers entwined. I was lost in her eyes, dazed by my own bliss. There I was, sharing an apartment and building a life with the woman of my dreams. I had arrived. Never mind the exact setting of my arrival, a one-bedroom dive on Lucas Street. So what if the kitchen was only a hallway with a stove and fridge? The air conditioner a decoy for a gaping hole in the wall? Did it really matter that the cops routinely searched the next apartment over? Our apartment represented freedom, a place to dwell in possibility. I'd chosen it after months of living in an even dinkier one, after months of delaying my decision to divorce my husband. On Lucas Street, I was starting over, thumbing my nose at patriarchal tyranny and compulsory heterosexuality. I was sharing this monumental life change and an apartment with Beth, who'd moved in with me a couple months after we started dating. We were like the lesbians in the old joke, which was a new joke to me. What does a lesbian bring on a second date? A U-Haul. Beth moved her hand from mine and sat up on the bed. She stared at me intently. I have something important to tell you, she said, but I don't want to discuss it. I sat up too, hackles raised. I don't like being told not to talk. There's something you need to know about me, Beth said. I braced myself. She didn't like the way I made love to her? She didn't want to live together after all? I'm really a man, she said. What? Beth was butch, and I loved her for it. She winked at me and opened doors for me. She wore flannel shirts, baseball caps, and high tops. She worshipped her pickup truck and never saw a power tool she didn't like. But a man? I'm really a man, she repeated. My heart sank. The woman I loved was crazy. Until this moment, she had not seemed crazy. Whimsical. What else could you call her fondness for Roadrunner and Scooby-Doo? But not crazy. Most of the time, she seemed cut to the chase sensible. She was one of the most intelligent people I'd ever met. Wise even. So what was going on? Surely she knew you didn't need to be a man to do so-called guy stuff. Why would anyone want to be a man, especially an amazing woman like Beth? Unless, I thought, she was one of those self-loathing women I'd read about in women's studies, utterly duped and decimated by the patriarchy. Beth had seemed like nobody's fool, but maybe I'd misjudged her. Except for a therapist, Beth said. You're the first person I've told. Though I was clueless, I felt honored that she had trusted me with an important secret. I could see that she believed what she was telling me, that it had been hard to tell me. Maybe I could help her. Maybe our life together would make her as happy to be a lesbian as I was. I'm never going to do anything about it, Beth said. I had no idea what she meant, but I felt uneasy. If Beth's sense of maleness was important, how could she never do anything about it? And what would happen if she did? I just wanted you to know, she said. Relieved that Beth didn't need anything more from me, not even words, I tried to recover my earlier sense of euphoria. I tried to dismiss her revelation. I told myself that I was refusing to borrow trouble, that I was living in the now. Beth was the most fascinating person I'd ever met. I loved her playfulness, her smarts, her strut. I loved how I felt when I was with her. I loved her. So I drew Beth to me and gave her a hug.
Is that the end?
Yes.
Ooh. Yeah, that was a powerful moment. So you were speaking in the prologue through the eyes of how you experienced it now. I mean, then how do you feel looking backwards at that moment?
Well, boy, lots of things. I guess I feel I feel sorry for both of us because I obviously really was clueless and had no idea what she was saying to me. And obviously I feel completely differently now. I know that she's a man and that she wasn't crazy. And I know that what I loved about her was not the fact that she was a woman, but something more than that. So, I guess I never answer questions about my emotions very well. I guess I'm kind of stunned at how much I've changed, I suppose.
How do you feel, Ben? How do you feel listening to the story from her perspective?
Well, at this point, we've been working on this book for so long now and have read, this piece some other times as well. And so the emotion of it isn't what really strikes me now with each new reading. What strikes me is the authenticity of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that actually, I was just working on a section today that talks about the idea of looking back and just acknowledging things that happened, how you reacted, without trying to say, oh, but it's actually not like that anymore, so it doesn't matter that happened. I think the strength, the courage for Mary to say, I'm actually going to tell this story to the world about something that makes me feel sort of sorry for who I was at the time. I think that's really important because it's sort of the other side of the coin to what you were saying a little earlier about the happy ending. Mm-hmm. Because happy endings don't come without expense.
No, they don't.
And yeah, I think that's just a really important thing, to not be afraid of the expense. And part of the expense is saying what Mary says in this piece and what we say throughout much of our book, which is, we just kept stumbling. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And I think what part of my hope about our book is that will give other people, our readers, permission to keep stumbling. Mm-hmm. And to not say, wait a minute, I should have figured this out by now. I should have, gotten to this place by now, whether individually or as a couple. Because part of what I feel when Mary reads that is, we had just started dating in this part. So at that time, I was 27, 28. And now, 21 years later, it's difficult to imagine a 28-year-old trans person who hasn't told anybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, the world is so different.
It really is.
There's a part of me that's a little bit ashamed. But again, I'm not going to keep that out of the story or ask Mary to keep that out of the story, because that's just part of what I had to stumble through to get to where we are now.
One of the realities of being in a non-traditional relationship, I guess we put it that way, is that there's a lot more negotiation involved and a lot more stumbling than when it's something as simple as being two women together, two men together. And for Ilya, one of the things that she still struggles with is my masculine side. And when we first started dating, you know, I love dress up. I don't care dressing up like a girl or a boy or whatever. It's all golden to me. And she's very old-fashioned Spanish butch. And so, you know, she likes opening doors. She likes, you know, I dress feminine when we dress up together. I like it, and I like pleasing her. But there's one of the challenges in our relationship is that, you know, I identify as a lesbian. I always will. And even though genetically, visibly, I present as feminine, you know, long hair and just my facial characteristics and my curves, etc. That's not how I identify. Actually, I've been mostly hostile towards parts of my femininity. I wasn't very comfortable with it most of my life. And it took, I think, about 5 years into our relationship for her to acknowledge my butch side. And she still has a hard time with it. Like, I have photographs of myself on Facebook where, especially one picture, I could easily pass for male. Not as like a butch lesbian, but actually male. Mm-hmm. And she wants me to get rid of those pictures, and I refuse. I'm like, that's a part of who I am. I may not express my gender in that way anymore. It was just a part of me being, you know, a baby dyke. And, you know, I loved experiencing visibly on the outside what I felt on the inside. And now I'm just into comfort. You know, I wear my cargo shorts or pants and a cotton t-shirt and sneakers and my hair pulled back in a ponytail. But even though she acknowledged my butch side, it's not something that she's terribly comfortable with. And the reason why I bring this up is like with negotiation, we've come to peace somewhat. You know, like I need to still be a lesbian, and she wants me to be a femme, not to change how I appear or anything like that. But she's like, you're a femme. And I'm like, no, I'm your femme. I'll be femme for you, and in our relationship, but that's not how I identify. And so things are a lot more complicated when you have to negotiate these things. And I know that's going to come up at times in your book together.
Yeah, when I've always been sort of casual and I would say fairly androgynous, and when Ben started transitioning, I was afraid that he would really want to do the butch femme thing, and I just thought, oh no, I can never do that, and you know, it's over. But fortunately for us, it turned out that wasn't his scene either, and we're just getting ready to write about a time in our life when we went to this conference called True Spirit out in Washington, D.C., which was for FTMs and their partners. And lots of the couples there were very butch femme. And so that sort of at first increased my anxieties, but then we also made a lot of friends. And there was, you know, a huge range of couples just like there are in any group of people. So we haven't had as much of that negotiation as one might think lately, but I guess near the beginning of Ben's transition we did.
You know, one of the challenges, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when we went to the PFLAG group and I told you that the leader wanted us to go to the trans one, and we did, and one of my reluctant things is like, I was like, I feel like I'm a terrible trans wife. Because I call Ilya she, and that, like, I was like, that's just how we talk to each other. And, you know, the stuff that's important comes natural, like husband. Like, I get very annoyed. There's one of the groomsmen in my wedding, is butch lesbian, and every time I see her at the bar, she's a bartender. She's like, "Oh, how's your wife?" And I'm like, "Urgh." It's like, I don't even want to tell you how Ilya is doing because you should know better than to call her my wife. She's my husband. And it's so funny. And it's like, it's the same reaction every time. And I wonder what it must look like to her, like that I never want to talk about my partner. But I'm like, husband.
To have friends that affirm how you see yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I have, the gamut, but it just like, I can't even tell you how Ilya is because you said wife and not husband. So.
Yeah, I think that the situation really makes you talk to each other in ways that, as you said, more traditionally gendered couples don't feel like they have to. But I think the irony is probably some of them should be. Mm-hmm. Well, but they're sort of on this path, and it kind of reminds me of a really sweet story that my parents told me once that, they got married in 1950 something, certainly didn't live together beforehand or ever spend the night together. And so they didn't know each other's breakfast habits, right? So they got married, came back from the honeymoon. Every morning, my dad would get up and my mom would have this beautiful, large breakfast on the table. And for 4 days, my dad ate it. And the fourth day in the evening, he finally got the guts to say, "Honey, I love you, and I love that you think it's your job to make me a big breakfast, but I've never eaten breakfast in my life, and I don't want to start now." But it was just that, and there was, and Mom kind of laughed and said, "Oh, I'm glad you finally told me," and it was just this wonderful newlywed sort of experience. But I think that when you start off by saying, this is what wives do, or this is what husbands do, or even if you're a lesbian couple and you say, wait a minute, I'm not going to do something just because the woman would do it, because we're both women and we're and we're not going to step into that. Either way, you're not saying to the other person, what would you like this interaction between us to be like? You're still putting some aspect of gender on it. And so there might be fewer conversations, and you don't maybe necessarily get to know each other quite as well as you're kind of forced to if in a differently gendered kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you on that. And the thing is, I guess the most important part is that we're happy.
Right.
And our life works, for us. And that's the only people who have to be happy and okay with our relationship. And I believe being together 9 years later is actually on the 24th of this month. Yay! Our first date was Pride Friday in 2005. Aww. Yeah. Yeah, it was really sweet. She took me to a nice restaurant that we went to. One of my friends is a lesbian club promoter, so we went to a party that she was throwing at a bar, and that was our night. And but it's like, the proof's in the pudding, so to speak. If I know that the way I use pronouns, and I've tried to kind of switch it, but I'm just so used to it, and it's also tied up with me being very stubbornly lesbian. But in the end of it all, I think that we're good partners to each other, even if it's not not a lot of people who are transgender's dream to have that kind of compromise. But it doesn't hurt her. Like if it hurt Ilya, I would fix it, but because she's blasé about it, we just kind of do our own thing. So, now that I've babbled my little heart out, I'd love to hear your prologue, Ben.
Okay, great. So this is one of the few places, if maybe not the only place so far, where I do speak directly to what Mary just said a little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mary and I remember my first coming out scene differently. She remembers us being in bed, but in my memory, we were in the living room. I don't, however, recall the context or my own decision to come out to her. All I remember was standing against one wall while Mary stood several feet away. So there was no plan, apparently, of a big talk. There was no invitation to sit on the couch to prepare for some news. I remember a physical tentativeness, maybe that space when two people believe a conversation is over, but one turns back with just one more thing to add. But that's all. I don't know why that day, that moment. I don't know if I weighed the risk, if I chose my words carefully. I have a vague sense that we had just made a big decision about our relationship, or perhaps I was getting ready to propose. I may have been thinking that if this woman was going to commit to me, she deserved to know everything, even my biggest secret. Throughout my life as a transgender person, I've had several of these short memories with no context. The first occurred when I was just 5 years old. "Hey, Beth Thiel," my best friend Debbie Barnes called to me as she tore into my backyard from her own next door. Other neighborhood kids were already there, climbing on our jungle gym, playing on our swing set. A typical summer afternoon so far. "I heard about this machine." Debbie stopped short just in front of me. "That can turn a girl into a boy." I remember tingling, dropping my jaw, raising my arms and spreading my fingers. I remember the red and white of the geodesic dome jungle gym, a pink blanket strewn over the very top for shade. I remember seeing Dave Simmons pumping so hard on my swing that one leg of the swing set lifted from the ground. I watched Seth and Paul Bank chase my cat through my mother's vegetable garden. I heard an airplane pass overhead and a car door slam in the next driveway. I felt the cool grass under my bare feet and the solid earth under the grass. It was going to be okay. There was a machine. I turned and ran toward the back door. The screen door to the mud room didn't weigh much more than I did, and I practically ripped it off its hinges as I barely slowed to wing it open. The mudroom floor was cement, and my feet slapped against it as I flew toward the open door to the kitchen. One slap, two, and I was in the air, my right foot leading my body up and above the single stair, across the threshold of the kitchen, to deliver the glorious news to my parents. It was going to be okay. There was a machine. Flash forward 7 years. It's my 12th birthday. That much I do remember. We are out to dinner, my family and I, to celebrate me, and I'm wearing a dress. A hideous purple velour t-shirt dress. A friend had given it to me, but no one had forced me to wear it. No one ever forced me to wear dresses. But here I was, having decided for myself. Having decided not just to put this thing on, but to put on something much larger, much more subtle, much more insidious. I had decided on my 12th birthday to put on, once and for all, the wrong gender. But why? What had gone through my head that day? Why had I betrayed myself so thoroughly? I don't know the answer to that question, any more than I know why I unbetrayed myself that September afternoon in Mary's living room, or in Mary's bedroom, wherever we actually were that day. The truth is, I love the fact that we remember that moment so differently. For one thing, it affirms the beauty and complexity of memory. I have a friend named Gia who tells a story about her Aunt Ruth drowning in Lake Michigan when Gia was a child. But it was not until Gia was an adult that she found out that Aunt Ruth had actually died at a nursing home in Nevada. It turns out that one summer, Gia was in the back seat on a family road trip in Chicago as her parents were discussing Ruth's death. Somehow, Gia's memory connected the death and her view of Lake Michigan as she heard about the death. Thus, in a 6-year-old mind, Ruth's death plus Lake Michigan out the window equaled Ruth drowning in Lake Michigan. As Mary and I have worked through our challenges and rediscovered the joy and openness and commitment of our early years, we have many drowned Aunt Ruth memories, and in a way, this is very freeing. First, it forces us to really dig into what was happening at the time, why we might have connected a true memory with some other aspect of the situation. Does Mary remember me coming out to her while we were in bed because that is what she immediately thought of? Because thinking about my gender made her think of our sex life? Or am I the one who was wrong in my memory, superimposing the distance between us in the living room because I was so uncomfortable with my disclosure? Regardless of who's right about the where and the how of that disclosure or other stories over the years, I like the fact that our memories differ because they each tell us about who we are. I remember some things Mary doesn't, and vice versa. We remember what is important and what is intense. And these two words don't necessarily mean the same thing to both of us. We experience things differently, and so we also remember them differently. This is one of the beautiful aspects of telling one another our own stories over and over, especially since our different perceptions of our relationship began the first time we met.
I love the way that you address and embrace memory. I was like, because I'd never thought of remembering it differently, but it things differently that way. But it has its own symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, what did you think when you first heard this prologue, when you first read it?
Well, I thought it was very beautiful, and it's always made me very sad to hear about Ben's gender struggles as a child, and I thought his interpretation of my memory, if I had misremembered it, to be very insightful. That probably is what happened if I'm wrong, and it never would have occurred to me. So that it's one of the pleasures of writing this together is learning as you go. I guess that's always the pleasure of writing.
Yeah, Ilya, she shared different things. Like, she kept on wishing for her birthday that she would wake up and be a man.
Mm-hmm.
And, in all the different ways. She has a theory how she ended up a female-bodied child. And that was her mother tried to, using homeopathic remedies, tried to get rid of her on more than one occasion. And even though she tried to abort Ilya, Ilya stayed in there and came out when she was ready. And her thought is that possibly the things that her mother was taking could have interrupted the process of her becoming male. And like, the other thing that's interesting, she's one of 8 children, and she's got a birthmark at the back of her neck that only the boy children have.
Wow.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It is.
Yeah, only the boy children have it. And there are other traits that she shares with her brothers that she doesn't share with her sisters. And It's not like the simple butch femme kind of thing or identity kind of thing. It's like biology kind of thing.
That must be very affirming for her.
Yeah, and upsetting, because she doesn't. The reason why Ilya doesn't want to transition is that she wants it to be real. Not that you can't get bottom surgery, but it's not what she wants her body to look like.
Mm.
And she doesn't like body hair, so she doesn't want to take tea. But she almost wishes it was magical, like she could use it to go to the bathroom standing up and to make love and make me with child, and then not have it for the rest of the time. She doesn't want anything dangling down there. But I wish she got her birthday wish too, that she would have what she always wanted, and unfortunately, in her dreams she's always male. And if she sees that she does not have a penis in her dream, she wakes up in a fright.
Wow.
Yeah. Like something's really wrong. It's not there, you know. And it's just, you never understand what other people's shoes are like until you hear about those different aspects of themselves, their dreams, in terms of ambition and hopes, and their actual dreams and how they perceive themselves. And you know, it's tough, you know, and there's no one journey for somebody who trans-identifies or whether they want to transition. And in the PFLAG group that I go to, there are a few people who are male-bodied but present, wear women's clothing and makeup and hair, but do not want to have surgery and have no desire to transition, and get a lot of pressure from other transgender members of the group because they don't want that. You know?
Yeah. It's amazing, the range.
It really is. I've met some fascinating people. I met someone once, and I use male pronouns because I met him. He was presenting as male, but he's had some medical treatment for transitioning, but not completely. He's still legally male. He's married to a female, but he presents as female quite a bit of the time. And his primary reason for not fully transitioning is because he's in a very male-oriented job, which he loves. Mm-hmm. And he's probably, I think, maybe late 50s. He's been in this job for a very long time. If he transitioned fully, he'd never get back professionally to where he is now. And he's going to have an awesome pension, and he's going to retire early, and then he's going to fully transition. And the thing is, this is one of the most peaceful people I've ever met in my life. Mm-hmm. So he's not really compromising. I mean, technically, sure, but he's not compromising his spirit, because his spirit is fine with what he's choosing to do. And I think one of the concerns, I don't know, concern might be a hard word, but you know, I mentioned a little earlier about how very different it is now, and there's so many just strives daily mm-hmm. for transgender rights, but I think that maybe a lot of people, hopefully not trans people, but supporters who maybe haven't talked to a lot of trans people, might say, oh, well, no, it's easier to transition now. Some insurance is covering it. You can be out, so transition. But no, not necessarily. It's not about saying, great, you can transition now. It's about saying, great, how do you want to live your life now? Mm-hmm. And those are two completely different questions.
And there's another reality that not a lot of folks know, is that there are employment issues, just yes. like you mentioned. And there, you know, a documentary that I watched, he was male-bodied and had a lot of experience in blue-collar job, and transitioned and then couldn't get a job and was being rejected in the place of male-bodied and identified folks, cisgender male, and that had no experience or little experience. And a lot of times, this is very unfortunate, but there's a lot of times when they go, transgender folks sell their bodies because they can't find another way of supporting themselves, or they deal with homelessness and not really finding a place for themselves. And one of the harder, I think the harder row to hoe is for transgender folks who, regardless of their transitioning, will never pass.
Right.
And that's hard. I mean, there are gorgeous male to female, that you almost couldn't tell. And likewise, there are female to male that have transitioned and you'd never be able to tell. And but the harder ones, what if you're too short or too slight? There's a male, female to male transitioning in the group. He is 5'2" and petite, and keeps on trying to save for the top surgery, can't make it happen, and so he's trapped in his body with a large bust, and he doesn't have a lot of choices there. And so I really feel for those who have to walk that harder road.
Yeah, I met a guy not too long after I transitioned who was in that situation, and I said to him, I really admired his emotional and mental strength for, being out as transgender before he could afford to transition. He wanted to transition. And he said, well, I don't have a choice. I don't have the money. And I said, well, what I really meant was, in a way, I think partially I protected myself subconsciously from coming out until I was in a position where I could transition once I decided to. Mm-hmm. I just really don't know if I could have lived very, very long and certainly not peacefully, really having remembered and being fully aware of being transgender and remembering all those childhood situations, but knowing there wasn't anything I could do about it and there might not ever be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the strength that it takes for a lot of folks to just get up and go to work every day is just beyond what many of us can possibly imagine.
It's like, I wish, if I ever, came into money, one of the things that I would do is for those who can't afford it to help. There's this trans male that I know. I was going to this bar, Henrietta Hudson's, and he was a bartender there. And the owner decided to have a benefit for Tasso. And the ad said, come support me so a bra doesn't have to.
Wow.
And it was fantastic. The bar was packed, and there were at least 5 go-go dancers, including his partner, who danced and gave all of their tips to go towards the top surgery. So that was a beautiful thing, and I was very, very proud of that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story.
Isn't it beautiful?
It is.
And clever.
Yeah.
And he's so happy, and one of the I don't know if you experience, because I think things are a little different, because most of my friends when I was in my 20s worked somehow at a bar as a go-go dancer, as a bouncer, a bartender, a DJ, an owner, something like that, a promoter. And my one friend, who was the only butch go-go dancer, had a very hard time that many of the people that she spent the majority of her coming out life with, like in the 80s, were all transitioning. And she felt abandoned, and hostile towards the butches that weren't butches anymore. And I've heard a lot of different people griping, there's no butches, everybody is like transitioning, and I was like, ugh. She couldn't understand, she couldn't wrap around it. But like for me, seeing how happy Tasso was, and there was another bartender who also transitioned, and I'm like, they're so happy. This, this is who they are, and this is, that's it, full stop, and but she just couldn't understand. And I think because I spend so much of my life in a gendered way, because I my shows, I generally interview lesbian fiction authors, and the majority of my friends are queer, that, you know, I see these things, and it's still, I was like, don't you get it? But I don't think she will. But there, as much as her lack of tolerance is painful, also being left alone is painful.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, because most of us have had a similar experience, whether or not, you know, maybe a large group of people. But, I mean, I remember when I was a freshman in college, there was a group of, I don't know, 3 or 4 other freshmen that I spent all my time with that year. And then toward the end of the year, they all decided to pledge a sorority. And where was I? And, you know, yeah, there was a part of me that was like, oh, sororities are stupid, blah, blah. But inside, I was just like, but I'm just sad because I can't hang out with them anymore because they have all these new friends. I mean, so it's difficult. And when the people that you want to hang out with, that you look up to, that you might want to date, are sort of like, well, nah, you know, they go away in your perception one way or another. That's a difficulty. But, you know, if those are conversations, and it doesn't have to be an us-them thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, again, I think that the complexity of those conversations is definitely becoming a lot more possible, which I think is a wonderful thing, because everybody should be happy and comfortable and listened to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just huge. And I mean, the happier people are, the less crazy they are, and the more they can contribute to other people's happiness. And it sounds like a Hallmark card, but it's really true.
Yeah.
I mean, Mary and I, both of us, I think, can do things in the world now in a much more positive way than we necessarily could for a long time.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so much has changed, like just in decades. You know, I'm 37, and when I was coming up, I got a lot of flack because I liked my high femmery as much as I liked my really butch looks, and butches would be like, you know, you're not one of us because you'll wear a dress, and the femmes were like, you're not one of us because you dress like a boy. And I had this moment where I thought I was like with like mine, and I was talking to, I don't know if she's transgender, but definitely a drag queen, because some people can be both. And so I said, you know, they keep on at me that like I need to make a choice, like one side or another, and she goes, well, why don't you? And I was like, fuck. Because I thought she'd somehow understand. And I said, well, I do. Every time I get dressed and open up my closet and put on my music, and do I feel like wearing cologne, or do I feel like wearing perfume, or platform heels, or Doc Martens, like whatever I'm feeling at the moment, that's what I was doing. And I was like, there's no place, there's nobody, you know, I can't identify with anybody. And this year on Facebook, they had 50 gender options that you can use to, and if the 50 don't work for you, you can still choose other.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
And
It's a sort of irony that the broader your tastes and desires, the harder it is to find a community.
And what's so strange, you know, part of the negotiation process is that Ilya's the only non-feminist that I have ever dated. And not in like a negative, like I hate feminists way, but Ilya doesn't identify with women, and she doesn't identify with lesbians. She's not comfortable around lesbians. She's perfectly comfortable around gay men and straight men, but she's not comfortable around lesbians. So what ends up happening is if I wanted to go out to a bar or a club, or even bringing Ilya to GCLS, she still kept herself apart because she felt like she couldn't possibly identify with anybody who was there. And, which was layered because she doesn't like to read. And so she was thinking, oh, these are all nerds or people who like to read. I'm like, there are honest to God blue-collar butches who like to fix shit just like you do, and dress like you do. and smell like you do. But she just couldn't. She has this block that there couldn't possibly be somebody that she could relate to while there. So,
is she going this year?
No, I'm being sent on my own.
Oh, well, you'll have fun, Liz.
Oh, I'll have fun. You know, the thing is that I have to respect her feelings, and you know, she came for me. You know, she did go to the award ceremony with me, bored to death, and but it doesn't make her comfortable. So if I want to go to a bar or a club, if I want to go to GCLS, she supports me in going on my own.
Yeah.
And I respect her for not feeling comfortable in that area, and I won't force her to, because when we first started dating, she would come and she'd stand there and look like she wanted to die.
So that's never good.
I was like, I can't have fun while you're like, she's like, no, you don't have fun. I was like, I can't have fun when you look like that. I can't have fun when you look like that. I don't want you to be that unhappy. So, you know, we figured out between the two of us what was comfortable, and I need to be around my peeps, my lesbianas. And, you know, it works for us, but it's so complicated. But at the same time, I think I was equipped to adapt by being raised by hippies.
Awesome.
And even though they were not happy when I came out to them, they thought I was having a phase. My mom was horrified, and you know, things got better, and now they like Ellie more than they like me. So it's like, you know, I went from them not liking my butch girlfriend that I moved in with after I graduated from college to absolutely adoring my trans husband. So that's my spiel whenever I go to these PFLAG groups and there are teenagers there. You know, I tell them it may suck when you first come out to them, but things change, and it might blow your mind how much they can change. You just gotta kind of hang in there. Yeah,
that's for sure. When I told my mom, who's not a hippie and very, very conservative, when I went to tell her about Ben being transgender, I was very nervous. I had made a whole set of notes, and so I'm getting ready to say, you know, and I start and I say, have you ever heard of transgender? And she's like, oh yeah, I've seen that on Oprah, and she was totally fine with it.
Yeah, you don't know.
Thank you, Oprah.
I know, right?
Yeah, go Oprah.
Thank you,
yeah,
Oprah.
she said, well, I'll try to call him by his new name. Was very sweet.
Yeah.
Ah, see, folks, happy endings out there.
Yeah.
You can't ever know how somebody's going to react, and sometimes that works against you, but somebody doesn't react like you think they will in a positive way. But you just, you know, it's a difference for everybody, and it's change for everybody. And
well, you know, one of the things that I can't remember where I heard it, and it's for coming out in general, not just coming out as transgender, is you've been thinking about this and coming out to yourself and contemplating it for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be fair to the people who you are coming out to, that it might take them some time to get used to the idea as well.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
So what are some final thoughts that you'd like to leave for this most auspicious Pride special reading and discussion?
That's some pressure. I guess I would say, I don't know, to just, if your partner is trans and you're having trouble with it, to just hang in there. And you know what you said, Liz, about how happy your friends were after they transitioned. I can't begin to describe Ben's happiness after he transitioned, and it was such an amazing privilege to witness and be a part of that. You know, it was truly transformative. So I would say to just be patient and hang in there, and something beautiful will happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so sweet.
Oh, for once I'm sweet.
You know, oh, sorry, cat fight outside. And I mean, I would just really second that. The patience, I think, is something that in our book comes out a lot when it is there and when it isn't there. No matter who you are in a situation, whether you're the transgender person, a partner, family member, whoever, there's seldom, if ever, a hurry to do something, to decide something, to react in a certain way. And I mean, any important change takes a lot of time and a lot of thought, and might make you cry a whole lot, and that's perfectly fine. It just, in the end, what matters, like we've talked about, is just being authentic and being able to live the life that you're here to live. And it can be really difficult to do that if you have layers on top of your authenticity of just this, you know, the silt that sort of falls down on a daily basis when you're not allowed to be yourself. And I think that it's a privilege to be a transgender person. I think this is an amazing time to be a transgender person, and for me to be writing about it. There's such receptivity out there on a lot of layers. If a sweet little old Catholic lady from small town Iowa can say, "Oh, I saw that on Oprah, it's awesome." I mean, you know, for us all to tell our stories is probably the most important thing any of us can do.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of coming out, like even me having this discussion with you, talking about how I don't think I'm a great trans wife, but I'm happy and we have a good relationship, is important to show that we're all human. And I think the road to authenticity is talking about all the things that are confusing or hard to understand, and, you know, negotiating and renegotiating and be patient and listening, and knowing that, you know, we can be very stubborn people and whatnot. But telling our stories it makes you seen. It's like what I say about, you know, reading lesbian fiction. I like to be seen. I like to be represented. I like to have something out there. And so I'm sure there are imperfect people who feel imperfect as well. That, you know, it's not that kumbaya, wonderful, you know, perfect thing, that, you know, we're human, and just as long as we try to be respectful and loving with each other, then, you know, we've done a good job.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, well said.
Woohoo! So thank you two so much for sharing.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah. You know, I think that, you know, I like when I have these moments where an interview is truly important, and I feel like this was a truly important interview.
Wow.
Oh, thanks, Liz.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So thank you guys for being on the show.
Well, thanks for inviting us.